Alright, story time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna give you a few stories that come from my childhood, and I just wanna get them off my chest because some of these things have kind of stayed with me and kind of shaped my experiences throughout life, and I kind of want to just share it with all of you. So, first one, why do I hate the Chili's restaurant? I'm gonna set the scene. So I had just won my second consecutive Junior Olympic championship for the high jump, and that was back in like 2010. So I was like 10 years old, and I went out with some of my track family friends and my family, of course. We went out to celebrate at the local Chili's in Sacramento, and I must tell you, the service was incredibly slow. We waited about 40 minutes just to get our order taken, and they did not have a lot of people at the Chili's. Like, there was maybe like 4 or 5 other families at the time, because we went like maybe like 5 p.m. It was like earlier evening. They did not have enough people that warrant such a slow service time. Anyways, we ordered our food after 40 minutes, and then our food arrived sometime after. I don't remember how long after. But this is when a red flag appeared. So my sister has, a few phobias that include mainly spiders, improperly washed silverware, and specifically hair in food. She has a keen eye, like a focused eye for all 3 of these things. She can spot it from across the room or any distance. She will notice it. So she saw from across the table, 2 people down, my friend's salad bowl had not 1 but 2 hairs in it. And she wasn't even the one eating it, but she managed to see it because it stood out to her from a distance, and it bothered her enough that she had to speak out. Obviously, that's disgusting. There's 2 hairs in someone's food. My friend originally scoffed at it and said, "Oh, it's just extra protein I can eat." But his mom made him send it back and get him a new one, which honestly, that should have been the first sign that this is going to be pretty poor. But after that little appetizer thing, they sent out the actual food, and nothing really alarming came with like its appearance or the taste, really. So kind of just finished my celebration meal, and then we left back to the hotel, and we were going to leave the next day. We were going to go in the morning to see my friend race, and then we were going to drive home for like 14 hours, which sucks. But however, later that night, I started developing some really strong and powerful stomach pains, and it was pretty bad. So bad that I woke up in the middle of the night, and I never wake up in the middle of the night. I'm such a deep sleeper. But it forced me awake, and I had the sense or the urge to rush to the bathroom. I felt myself wanting to vomit. So I rushed to the bathroom. And the moment I made contact with that toilet bowl, I just upchucked the entire dinner, and what felt like, honestly, my guts coming out at the same time. And I have to preface saying that I'm actually terrified of the feeling of throwing up. It's just really uncomfortable for me, and because I feel like I'm totally out of control of my senses when I throw up, and I also kind of fear choking on my own vomit, especially when I'm asleep. So needless to say, I do not like throwing up. It is very uneasy, uncomfortable, kind of scary feeling for me, and I was very frightened, and I was very ill. So the next day, after that whole debacle went down, my family was concerned. We deemed it as food poisoning. We had to go watch my friend compete, and before we drove back home for like 14 hours or whatever it was. So we went to watch him compete, and I did not eat anything that morning. I could not eat, could not keep any food down. The sight of food was so repulsive to me. And my friend's mom, while we were watching his race, told me to try drinking carbonated drinks. So she had some Sprite on hand. She said that would help ease the pain of my stomach. And I'm a kid, like 10 years old. I'm like, yeah, I'll try it. I don't see any issue drinking a Sprite. And I still get told that to this day that a carbonated drink will help my stomach. However, due to this ensuing experience, I do not believe it at all. I refuse to believe that this helps my stomach feel better if I have any type of stomach pain. So I started slowly sipping the Sprite, and I'm thinking it's gonna help my stomach. About 10 minutes later, as I'm walking down the stadium steps, I feel myself wanting to throw up. So I'm making hayway, trying to make I'm making sure I don't throw up on the stairs, so I don't like splash zone the people around me. So I'm like booking it down the stairs, trying to find a nearby trash can. I see one, and I can't even make it to the trash can. Like, I was lucky I made it to the toilet the first time. I started regurgitating this Sprite, and only the Sprite, because I did not eat anything. About 3 feet from this trash can. It looked like someone turned on the garden hose at full power. Like, in the moment, because my brain was so wired for Pokemon, I felt like Ash Ketchum's Squirtle in the anime, and I was using Hydro Pump at this trash can. Like, that's how much Sprite I had consumed, and how much force I was regurgitating this thing out of my body. It literally felt like I was using Hydro Pump. It felt pretty cool in the moment to ease the pain of having to vomit, but not a great feeling. Not a great feeling. So now we had to embark on that 14-hour journey home, and that was not fun. I think we had to pull over twice just for me to vomit, because we weren't anywhere nearby somewhere that I could vomit. So we just had to pull over on the road and vomit. And eventually we stopped at a Carl's Jr. Just to get some food. And I attempted to eat a burger. But the minute I swallowed something, I had the urge to throw up again. So I had to charge my ass into that nearby bathroom at the Carl's Jr. And again, I barely make it to the sink. I mean, before I didn't even make the trash can. I kind of didn't even make the sink. I just threw up water and small chunks of burger onto the sink counter, and that was that. The whole thing was just covered in debris of my... It didn't even look like vomit, honestly. It just looked like water with like some chunks in it. But yeah, I just did that all over the counter, bathroom sink. It was a very painful couple of days for me. Worst experience of food poisoning I have ever had or even heard of personally. It was so bad. Like, I don't think I ate really much of anything in 2 days. I probably lost like 10 pounds, and I was pretty light back then, so do not recommend that to anyone. Alright, let's move on to the second story. So I'm going to tell you about how I almost fell off a cliff while hiking. True story. So we were hiking up, I believe it was in Yosemite. It was not Yellowstone, it was Yosemite. So we were at Yosemite, and I believe it was like some cliffside kind of adjacent to the relative region of Half Dome. It wasn't necessarily at Half Dome, but it was like in that vicinity. And we were hiking up this giant cliffside, and they kind of had this extended flat area of rock for about like 200 yards that went from like the trails to the edge of the cliff. And so we were just kind of walking on that because it was pretty cool, like the way the rocks were. I don't know. It was almost like cobblestone, but like a giant version of it, like for giants, if that makes sense. That's kind of what the texture looked like of that surface. And so we were just kind of walking on that, and then me, my sister, and our two family friends, because we had a family vacation together, we saw a dead tree about 10 yards from the edge of the cliff, and we wanted to just, climb on it and stuff. It's pretty cool, and we're still relatively far away from the cliff edge. Maybe 10 yards was a higher estimate, but it was relatively close to the edge, but not like in danger. We're not close enough that we're in danger. So I thought. We climbed on the tree for kind of like a few minutes, took some pictures, kind of just played around on it, pretended that we were, shipwrecked on some random log in the ocean. Creative imagination for kids. And then everyone else eventually kind of just walked away, went back towards, near the trail area. My sister and our two family friends, they got off the log, and they were heading back that way, and I was the last person. But I kind of wanted to just take in the view, so I kind of looked over at the the valley below us, and I kind of wanted to just take in the view. I wanted to experience all of it. And then I tried to step off, and I completely lost my balance, and I had to like grip onto like a branch nearby, and then there was another branch. It was a much bigger branch that I put my foot on because I needed to regain my balance. So I step on it, but I must have stepped. It's a pretty old dead tree, so as much as like the branch was large, it was probably not sturdy at all. I just completely stepped through the branch and it broke, and I just collapsed on the ground immediately. And I just, with all my forward momentum, I just start rolling, and the cliffside starts to angle a little bit. So I know I'm approaching near the edge of the cliff, and I just start rolling, and I can't stop. I'm also in pain because I just fell on my elbow and my arm, my shoulder, and I'm just like, I don't even know if I got stabbed by anything with the wood of this tree. I just start rolling towards the edge, and I eventually had to grip onto, like I said, it's like a cobblestone. There's like tiny little gaps in the stones, and I just have to grip onto the stone as I'm moving towards the cliff. And I probably stopped myself a few feet from the edge, and I just start dragging myself back towards the log because I'm so deathly afraid of standing up. I nearly just fell off this cliff, all because of this dead tree's branch giving out on my step. And so that happened. I'm crying my eyes out because, first of all, it hurt like hell to fall off off a dead tree flat onto the like stone rocks and then start rolling. And then I'm also terrified because I almost just fell off the cliff. Where were the parents? Probably 200 yards away. Didn't even realize that I was still on the tree. And then when I approached them, they were asking why I was crying. No shit, I tell them what happened. They're just like, I think you were over-exaggerating it. No, I was not. I physically saw how close I was to rolling off the edge of the cliff. I could have easily just died. And they would have been like, where the hell did he go? But luckily I'm still here today. So yeah, I'll move on to the next story here. So this one's a little bit of a fun one. A little bit different, a little unique. Getting my water there. So I'm going to tell you about the time I made a magnetic fishing rod just to be lazy. But here's the caveat. It almost killed me. All right, let's get into this one. So I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I decided that I wanted to grab my toys off the stairs or anywhere around the house without having to go up and down that staircase all the time, because all of my toys were kept into, we kind of had this loft area in my house, and we had cabinets for a lot of my stuffed animals and toys because they didn't want everything lying around. And so I always would play on the staircase because it was honestly fun to have, a level of depth and height between, your interactions with toys. You played with toys, you understand what I'm talking about. You want to have terrain when you're playing with your toys. But I always would leave stuff there, and I would have to clean it up after myself. But I would get so lazy because I didn't want to constantly go back and forth, up and down the stairs, putting stuff away. So I got a piece of string, and I had this, and I got the inspiration because I had this little miniature fishing rod that had a tiny little magnet on it, and it was for this little fishing game, and you were supposed to just cast the fishing rod and the magnet would attach to the mouth of the fish, which had a little magnet inside of it, and that's how you would fish the fish out of the water. It was obviously a tiny little miniature game, for little children, but I used that as my inspiration. I was like, okay, what if I get a piece of string and kind of fashion it as a fishing rod, and I attach an actual magnet to it, and I use that to kind of attach to any sort of metal on my toys. Now, if the toy didn't have metal, I would have had to manually do it, but for the ones that it did, I would kind of position them and kind of use this little fishing rod to kind of pull them up past the railing into the loft, and then I would put them away. And it was pretty efficient way of doing it. At times, also, it could have just been easier for me to just pick it up. But I was so hell bent on being lazy, of not having to go back down the stairs, that I was willing to make this contraption just to put my toys away. So you may be thinking I was probably a pretty efficient, wise, maybe somewhat optimistic child. But no, I was a buffoon. I was stupid. So this same string that I used for this fishing rod, I decided, why don't I attach it with the magnet to the top of our blinds in our house, like above the door. But then I was like, oh, why don't I fashion it around the railing and tie the string to the railing? And I said, I can attach the string to my waist, and then I can kind of go down the rail and be like Spider-Man, because I was so obsessed with Spider-Man, and I mean, it's still my favorite superhero to this day. But I decided, let's just tie that same string around my waist so I can swing around like Spider-Man down the railing. Well, that is the stupidest thing a child can do, because first of all, I'm not even checking if the string is tied properly around the railing, nor is it tied properly around my waist. And it was not tied properly around my waist. It completely flew up my torso, and as it was moving up, it was tightening as it went, because I was putting, actual pull onto it. And it completely ties around my neck, and that's where it stops. It just tightens up because it grips around my chin, and I fall onto the ground because I'm freaking out, and I'm yanking it. I'm yanking this string on my neck as I'm trying to fall to the ground. I'm basically choking myself. My parents were luckily nearby when they saw this. They were like, what the hell are you doing? And they had to get me out of the string. I think they cut it. But yeah, if they were not paying attention to their stupid idiot child that I was, I probably would have killed myself. But yeah, it was cool to be Spider-Man for 2 seconds before I ended up almost killing myself. But if you ask me, it was a pretty badass thing to do. It almost worked if my waist was a little bit thicker. I was a pretty skinny child, so it didn't really work out for me. Pretty unlucky as well. And the reason it was able to go past my arms, because you're wondering like how to go from my torso to my neck, is I was holding the string like Spider-Man. So I was holding it with my arms above my head, and it just rolls past my shoulders, and then that freaks me out. I pull my arms down, and then it immediately tightens around my neck. So I was basically doing it to myself. It was like, I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, it was meant to be a magnetic fishing rod for my toys. Ended up being my Spider-Man web that almost choked me. Yeah, fun times. All right, let's move on to the next story, or the next story of how I almost died. Because that's exactly what happened. How I almost died on the playground in the 2nd grade. Man, how many times have I almost killed myself? That's kind of wild. So I was playing a game called Man on Sand. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but basically the premise is when your eyes are closed whenever you get onto the playground structure itself, and you can yell the term Man on Sand, and anybody who's on the sand would become out. But if they jumped onto any part of the structure and they were not touching the sand, you can't just like jump in the air. If you land back on the sand and it still count, you would have to physically keep yourself off the sand to prevent yourself from getting out if I yelled Man on Sand. And then if I was on the structure, I had to keep my eyes closed. And you would walk around, you kind of just feel around. If you touch someone, they would get out, and they would have to stand on the fence line, basically out of bounds, so they weren't going to get in the way of the other competitors. And then if you were on the sand itself, you could open your eyes, if you were the person that was tagging people. But you could not yell man on sand. If you wanted to do that, you would have to physically jump and make contact with the structure and then call man on sand. That was the only way you could potentially get someone like that. So there was a lot of strategy involved. But that's not the emphasis of the story. That's just the exposition. So it was routine that I would play this in the mornings before school actually started. And I was pretty agile and quick and reckless with my body. And that made me very skilled at the game. And I was very competitive. That's why I was so willing to be reckless with my body. And I mention that is because that recklessness is how I ultimately got myself in a pretty sticky situation. So the bell rang for us to line up, kind of like they would have us line up in front of our, like, these numbers on the blacktop that indicated what our room number was, and our teachers would come and pick us up. So the bell rang for that to start happening, and everyone rushes out from the playground to go stand in line. And then I start going down this kind of rung ladder. It kind of starts off parallel with the structure, and then it curves down to the sand. And so I start going down that, and the first, I think, yeah, between the first and the second rung, I just completely slip. And I fall, I hit my chest on the first rung, which kind of slows the momentum a little bit. It hurt really bad. And then I immediately got stuck and trapped on my chin, and it was between my chin and my throat, basically. So I was beginning to suffocate. And because I was holding onto the railings as I was going down back first, because of the panic, I had twisted my arms in, so I was actually completely tangled, and I could not grip the railing opening of where the ladder was. So I was just completely stuck. My arms were incapacitated. I couldn't reach the ground because I wasn't tall enough. I was too high off the ground, and I was suffocating, basically choking to death, because my throat and chin had basically gotten stuck on the rung of the ladder. And so at this point, I'm thinking I'm gonna die. I can't scream out because of how much pressure the rung was putting onto my throat, and I couldn't slide my head because I had so much body weight friction that I couldn't move my chin. And the more I moved, the more I would hurt my throat. So I was completely incapable of moving my body. And I was probably stuck there for a total of like 45 seconds or so, and it felt like an eternity. Like, I actually had actual thoughts of death come to mind. Like, as a 7-year-old child, I'm thinking about having my life flash before my eyes. And that's a very scary feeling. And I still have those vivid thoughts of what I was thinking about in that moment. But fortunately for me, one of my friends noticed that I wasn't walking back with them. And he's like, where's Sean? And he decided to walk back and check in on me, see where I was. And he saw me just dangling on this rung ladder, incapable of moving. And he immediately senses, like, there's something wrong. He gets one of my other friends to come help him. And they come and they see me just, like, incapable of moving, stuck on this ladder. They go up on the structure. They each grab one of my arms and they start pulling me up. But they're not strong enough to basically pull me at that angle. But they had basically freed my arms from the entanglement that I was in. And from that brief moment, I think it was like 3 seconds that they had lifted me up, I basically was able to catch my breath. I turned my head completely 90 degrees. So, because from the side, my shoulders can fit through the rungs, but my chin couldn't. So it was like a very tight space, and I said I had to risk it. And I completely bent 90 degrees. I tried to make it parallel with my chest, and I just screamed out. I told them, just drop me. And so they dropped me. I fell right through the rung and down into the sand. Yeah, you can call it kind of lucky that I was even able to measure that, get that angle properly and not have my chin hit it again. Because I could have hit my chin, hit the back of my head going down, and it would have done a lot more. I just fell completely through, unscathed at that point. Honestly, I'm so appreciative that they recognized that I was not walking back with them. They, you know, as kids, sometimes they don't even notice things like that. They came back and they saved my life. The supervisors had already left the playground. They didn't even check to see if everyone had left the playground. Extremely negligent on their part. And if it weren't for my friends, I would have died. Like I would have silently suffocated on a playground ladder. Like that's the saddest way to go out. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed my little story time. Damn, it's been quite a while, but I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, I'll see you next time.